This episode is sponsored by Origami Risk, an award-winning, adaptable, cloud-based platform that can help you and your business manage all aspects of resilience, such as risk, safety, insurance, and even the management of business continuity and disaster recovery plans. Because Origami's single platform connects all of these functions, it provides a unified view of risk, leading you to better decision making, thus better business resilience. To help you boost your business's resilience, Origami Risk has put together a collection of free ebooks and videos exclusively for the RESILIENCEPOD family. To get access, visit origamirisk.com/resilience. Enjoy the episode. Everyone, welcome back to the Resilience Pod, the podcast helping you become resilient in our world full of disruptions. You're here with me, your host, Rina Singh. Thank you for tuning in today. Now, today's episode is going to be centered around diversity in resilience, specifically on how to make operational resilience language accessible. And who better to have this conversation with than my next guest, who does exactly this. He is an accredited trainer, a well-rounded resilience operative, and comes from a wealth of background in Category 1 respondents. So that's services like the police, fire, and has immense skills in emergency management. So without further ado, and to get right into the conversations, joining me today is Balvinder Bains. Hi, Bal, how are you doing?
Hi, Rina. Wow, what an introduction. Now I've got to live up to that.
Yes, you will. Welcome to the Resilience Pod.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
You are welcome. Now, when we started talking, and as I've alluded today, that this podcast is all about diversity and resilience, specifically about making language accessible. And it's, to be honest, it's not something that I had really considered before. And that's why I'm really keen to explore this with you. Why do we need to consider this kind of language, and why do we need to consider making it accessible?
Yeah, so whilst, as a lot of my resilience professionals will know, we have structures, we have arrangements, we have policies, we have procedures, but sometimes the glue in all of that is the language. And especially when you're working with partners you may not have encountered before, there can sometimes be that little bit of difficulty in getting the message across. It can even be that when we're speaking English as well. We do get a little bit insular in our world, and we've got to consider the takeaways for those that are wanting to join the conversation, wanting to learn, but more importantly, those who are actually impacted by it as well, because sometimes it might not be until we're well into a major incident that they're actually affected by this as well. So if we're not careful with our language, I just believe that there's a danger of us creating an exclusive environment. And you only get a certain worldview when we're faced with a particular problem. But by opening up the dialogue, I think we can increase the diversity of thought. We can get a better product. We can bring better value. And we can even get that from individuals who don't actually consider themselves to be resilience professionals. The examples that come to my mind today are the organisations such as Carl Said and the Penny Appeal, who've done fantastic work in response and recovery efforts, local, nationally, and internationally as well. So I know that our profession was born out of the uniformed services. I know we've got concepts and we've got a lexicon, but again, it goes back to the start. Who are we doing this for? What are we trying to achieve? I'm also a trustee at a place of worship in Bradford. I'm a trustee at one of the Sikh Gurdwaras. So when our organisation found out that there were two trusts in the area, basically, that needed some assistance during the response to COVID, the Gurdwara and the congregation managed to raise over £50,000. And it seems as if, you know, there are many places in the UK where NGOs and small community groups can bring a massive amount of value and assistance. So it's just about opening up that dialogue to start off with in particular.
Yeah, and when you're opening up this dialogue, and I know from when we've had conversations in the past, some of these you're in some of these diverse geographic areas, right? Because you're from the north, and there's that diversity there more so than where, say, maybe you're living in like a countryside somewhere in the UK, right? It varies, and that's why I'm saying
right,
I've never really considered like making the language accessible a really big thing. But when I reflect back on it, I think, well, as resilience professionals, we don't even understand sometimes the language we're using, let alone someone who might be in a diverse geographic location. And I guess that's what's really made you consider that, right? Because you've worked with different kind of diverse backgrounds, and when you've used resilience language, what has been the reaction and feedback from that? Have they understood it?
Yeah, so particular concepts such as risk assessment, risk tolerance, risk appetite, arrangements, protocol, all these words that we use in our common vocabulary on a daily basis. When I've been trying to communicate this with groups out there in the community, they've often said, hang on, just stop there for a second, right? What is it that you actually want from us? What do we actually need? Whether it's to reach a place of safety or to reach a place of compliance. So that's a lot of the experiences that I've had. Now, I've even worked in a neighbouring county where I was working with well-established communities up in the north, and we were looking at small hamlets and trying to communicate the risks around flooding. And in that community, there were we saw occasions where local residents were taking measures of their own, and whilst they were protecting their own property, they weren't considering the effects it was having on the local infrastructure and their neighbours as well. And so it's about opening up that dialogue and those concepts to say, right, okay, let's consider community resilience. What is that to you? What does it look like?
And how do you change the language then? So it's all well like doing all these things, but how have you, so you've given an example, but how have you then changed the language so people understand in those communities, like the Gurudwara, doing a risk assessment, like all those kind of things?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So that's been by trial and error.
Okay.
So there was some years ago when I was working for the fire brigade, we were trying to increase compliance in terms of fire safety. And what we did was we invited several committee management members into a fire station to deliver a presentation by at the end of it, which we were told it was far too technical and we didn't understand some of the concepts. So my project team and I took that back to the drawing board. We actually spoke to members within that community and said, right, okay, what does risk assessment actually look to you? Is there other vocabulary that we can use? Anyway, in those situations, sometimes there isn't, and it's just about explaining. Anyway, following those efforts, and I even took that on that occasion. I took it one step further by translating government guidance officially, and we held another workshop basically, and the reception was far more positive in that we were actually invited to deliver a third workshop inside a Gurdwara in Leeds.
Okay, so what did you change exactly? I know you've mentioned that you've kind of translated it into, I guess, another language to fit the audience, but what in that presentation did you do that was so different to the first one where they were like, no, we don't want to, we don't want that, to invite you to come back and do it for the third time?
Yeah. So it was about bespoking the content, bespoking the discussion. So we weren't just talking about premises, we weren't just talking about other places. We were actually looking and using the example of a Sikh place of worship. Where were the other areas of risk in that building? And also, it was education from them who were saying, look, we're not just places of worship. We run social classes, we have educational classes, we have people from all ages, of all disabilities who attend our site on a number of days. So don't just think that you're going to be coming to a hall full of 50 to 100 people who are going to be sat in one place, because we could have kids across the road who are on a Sunday morning school session, or we could have youngsters upstairs doing karate or other fitness sessions as well. So yeah, it was about bespoking the conversation, and we got a lot more input and a lot more value out of doing that.
And so it was about involving them in the conversation and asking them what it means. Okay, so we've kind of heard about like why we need to use the language because of the dispersed like kind of diversity in some of these audiences, and you've given us an example of where it might cause confusion, and you've told us how you've overcome that basically by kind of involving the people, making it relevant to their language they understand. Obviously this has been trial and error, as you said. At what point did you really think, oh crap, like we need to, as an industry, do something about it? When did you first think of that?
Okay, so going back to my policing days then, there was one incident in particular where one evening there was a major incident involving the discovery of several oxyacetylene cylinders that had been discovered in a backstreet garage. The area was home to a predominantly BAME community, and I was part of the local warning and informing efforts, basically the door knocking. But what I started to realise, Rina, was that those that were opening the doors, and I remember this vividly, were elderly members of those families. And some of them didn't have great English speaking skills. And what was more surprising was that very few minutes into the conversations that I was having with those people, smaller children and younger persons in the household would then come to the door and assist. Now, whilst, and also using my Punjabi speaking skills, whilst we were able to get the message across, I think back now and think, you know, were they fully aware of what we were offering and what the extent of danger was? And I honestly think that sometimes, you know, to others this may seem a bit of a form of magic, but it's not. I think what it is, what it comes down to, is putting those provisions and arrangements and having those relationships built on trust well in advance, and using all the tools at your disposal and all the services and resources that you've got, because uniformed services and local organisations often go into a community and are wanting help there and then, or wanting to help there and then. And then you get members of the community saying, well, where have you been, you know, during the other 364, 65 days a year when we wanted to have, you know, a conversation with yourselves? The other bits that I would like to add is that I honestly believe that there should be a better link between resilience professionals and diversity steering groups. From the conversations that I've had with colleagues, it seems to be a bit of a disconnect at the moment. I'm also not entirely convinced that equality impact assessments are being used properly or being thoroughly considered. I think they're a bit stock and standard at the moment. So those are just some of the things. Now, what I've done personally is, over the years, I've got involved with staff networks. So I've got involved, just to mention a few, the Black Police Association, the Asian Fire Service Association, and recently APNA NHS. And by getting involved in those discussions, you can actually bring organisational improvement as well, and you can improve the way we do things and deliver. So I would say to my colleagues out there, if you've got a diversity steering board, get on there and get involved in the discussion and try and take part in some of the projects as well that are being rolled out.
Okay, that's really interesting. And I guess one of the things is to actually be aware of this, especially when you're dealing with like frontline, the public, in terms of, we're very much looking at emergency management, like frontline kind of resilience, rather than sitting in our nice offices and doing it that way, which is a different consideration, right? And we don't all have the privilege of knowing a second language, right? Like it's for you, it's fine because you can speak in Punjabi, you can speak in English, you could be, if you're in that area, translate if you really wanted to, but a lot of us won't be able to do that. And how can we then overcome that? Then do we get a consultant, or do we
I'm really glad we've got to this point in the conversation, because just another example, when I was a fire inspector, I was dealing with an Italian family from Europe who were stuck in unsafe set premises. Now, it was just far too dangerous for them to reside there overnight. So we had to go down the enforcement route. So whilst we were preparing those documents to serve at a later time in that day, when we returned, that family had gone. And I have a feeling that they weren't aware of the social care provision that could have been afforded by the council or other organisations. Now, since that incident, what I've realised is, you know what, we have the professionals within our community. We have organisations and groups that can help, that are wanting to help as well. So at least in Leeds, where this occasion, where I'm I'm talking about on this occasion, I was able to access a part of the council that had a fantastic relationship and had a network of people that were willing to translate and willing to come out unseen, that were willing to go there, and afterwards were wanting to build and create a better and more effective working relationship. So I spent some time trying to formalize those arrangements. And it was a two-way process as well, because those individuals, some of them were newly arrived in the country, were wanting to make a new life for themselves, or wanting to get accreditation, but just needed a little bit of experience. And so these circumstances and occasions were great evidence for them to record.
That's, that's really insightful. And it's something that if you're listening or watching and you're doing this frontline, have you actually thought about going to the community, seeing who's available to help translate some of the stuff that you're giving out, some guidances? Let us know, let me know, let Bal know, because I mean, personally, I've not ever noticed that, but I'm not in such an area where that would be so prevalent. So for me, it's like a whole different world. Like, have we actually considered that? And I feel like that's a really easy tip to do, like go and ask. Really insightful there. Do you have any like final tips and thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience on this?
Going out there and just meeting people and going to talk to them and finding out a little bit about them and their community and what they're looking to achieve, because if you just look around in your own city, certain areas will not remain the same. They will change over time. They will change perhaps in the course of an evening. We've got several areas here in Leeds where you can go during the day, and then on an evening it's a totally different setting. Not to say that it's any more hostile or there's more risk, but different things are happening. You will see different people, and the experiences are so valuable. So I would just say to people, please do not discount that, but actually get out there and start talking to people.
And that's a really good point. And one of the challenges I know people will come back with to you on this is, well, we don't have time.
Yeah, I know.
And I bet that's a challenge you faced. Like, how have you overcome that? Like,
So, that thing about not having time, well, think about it this way. If a major incident occurs, I'd rather know the person that I'm working with during the response and recovery as opposed to having to start from scratch.
Yeah.
And could be via subgroups. I mean, our local resilient forums have got really good at this over the years. But sometimes you just need some people at the sharp end to maintain those relationships.
Yeah, quite right. So, Bal, thank you so much for giving us a little
food.
It's
been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Please invite me back.
You've actually really just given us a food for thought here, and whether it's really worth, I ask you and the audience, if you've tuned in, watching us or listening, is like Bal said, do you want to get to the incident and be the first time you're speaking to them, no understanding of what's going on in certain areas, and then trying to explain the language, have those barriers when we could have just done this before? At the end of the day, resilience is about being proactive and preempting things as well as being reactive. So how are you guys going to make your operational resilience language accessible for everyone? Let me know.
And come back and tell us.
Yes, please do. And if you want more details of what Bal has exactly done, because we are short on time.
And hey, we're all looking to learn, aren't we? Myself included. So
yeah, and I don't feel that in the industry there's actually some standard on this. So it's very much like trial and error, like Bal has, and that's why he's come on to share kind of his insights. So if you've done stuff and you've experienced things, then let's share it with each other. Let's create a standard. Let's, why not? So let us know your thoughts. Bal, thank you so much for joining us on the pod. We'll see you next time. And guys, if you tuned in and you found this useful, let me know. Don't forget to subscribe to the resiliencepod.com site. And guys, until next time, this is me, your host, Rina, saying with Bal, saying bye, and keep on investing in your resilience.